And before we turn to the SCO meeting, I do want to talk about the growing menace of a surge in anti-India sentiments fueled by Khalistani extremists in the UK, the US and Canada. Now, anti-India sentiments are one thing. Having protests are also one thing. Yes, if you're standing up there with a poster in your hand and you are saying whatever you want to, it could be covered under the freedom of speech. But what is not acceptable, and it's been made very clear both by the Indian government and frankly even by the host nations, what is not acceptable is the sort of direct and indirect, frankly, violence that we are seeing against Indian high commissions, against Indian consulates. We saw that in London, we've seen that in the United States. We're seeing direct threats being made against Indian diplomats, Kill India posters with the pictures of Indian diplomats on them. This is not acceptable. This is not free speech. This is an incitement to violence, and it is an incitement to violence against diplomats. This is also prohibited by the Vienna Convention and under all forms of international law. Any violence, such as the violence that we are seeing in these images, the attack, for example, on the Indian High Commission that we saw a few months ago, this is not acceptable behavior anywhere, and that is why direct action is required. Now, for this very program, for the India story, I had spoken to the Indian High Commissioner to the UK, Vikram Swamy, who also finds himself on a couple of those posters. That was done about a month ago, and a month ago, just after the attack on the Indian mission in London. He was clearly undeterred by the attack when I spoke to him. He showed us where exactly that attack had taken place, and he did say that he and his colleagues are taking their role of representing India around the globe seriously, but also indicating that security needs to be provided. Let me just play for you an excerpt of that interview that I had done with the Indian High Commissioner to UK, Vikram Swamy, a month ago.
The Indian flag is why we are here, and we have no desire to allow people to sort of push us into a position where we can't even fly the flag. I mean, what else is a diplomatic mission for if it doesn't fly the flag?
And that's why I guess it's a question that we have to ask. The Indian government's already asking it. If you take a look at the security around India House and Aldwych, for example, it's clear that the security is still not what it could be. In case extremist elements want to make another attack, they may well be able to do that, and that's why security needs to be provided. But it's not just in London. Exactly that same security has to be provided by the host nations to Indian missions everywhere on the planet. The sort of scenes that we've seen in San Francisco and in America are also unacceptable. And all of this is particularly relevant now because in the last few days, online posters have surfaced calling for rallies at Indian missions in the UK and Canada. Radicalized posters display Indian diplomats as what are described in the posters as murderers of Khalistani movement leaders, the leaders who passed away recently. Now, the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Arindam Bagchi has said that India has raised the issue of threats to Indian diplomats in London, but it will judge the UK authorities only by what actually happens on the ground, the point we were making a couple of minutes ago. Now, conspiracy theorists apart on who are actually behind the deaths of Khalistani activists around the world, it has to be said that that security is something that must be taken very, very seriously. The more pertinent point that we are going to be now asking are our missions and staff around the world safe? The Canadian Prime Minister and the UK Foreign Secretary have both said violators of peace will be punished and that such attacks are unacceptable. But what's the actual situation on the ground and the perception on the ground? Are stricter actions needed from countries like the Canada or the USA or the UK to preserve their freedom of speech? Fine. But also to look after the security of Indian diplomats globally. This is a theme we're going to keep coming back to. It is an important question, and we will continue to look at it on this program and other programs in the coming weeks. But let's now move to our big focus this particular week on the India story, which is the meeting of the SCO.